Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Spill the Marketing Beans. Today I'm really excited because our guest today on the show has, done every cool thing that you possibly can when it comes to content. Professor at universities, check. Right now heading content for foundation marketing, and then even running her own show at Storyful, check. Doing creative strategy and content and stuff at places like Time Inc. or NYT and HuffPost, for example. Check, check, check. So really glad to have you today, Melanie Deziel. And I just can't wait to get into, talking about things like storytelling and stuff. So first of all, welcome. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to get to share my story.
Speaking of, that's exactly what I want to talk about today. Now, I know that whenever we, hear about, writing content or things like that for our products and brands and things like that, everyone says, no, we want to hear stories. Stories are what gets people ticking. First of all, how do you define what storytelling is, and how can brands do this very well? I mean, take us through examples, what you worked with, take us through it all.
So I think story is one of those buzzwords that can be defined in a lot of different ways, and we kind of use it in ways that are convenient for us as marketers. But I think when at the core, what we're talking about is the ability to connect with people on sort of a human and emotional level. So that can come to life in a bunch of different ways, but sometimes that's a human story, more a personal story. It could be your own personal story as a founder, as a marketer, as a customer even. It could also be the organization's story. So it's really talking about where did we come from and what are we trying to do in the future, looking at the organization itself as sort of a main character. And it can also be stories of individual instances. So, this is the first, our first customer, here's how that went. Or, this is a specific customer that we had a great relationship with, or a challenge we faced and how we overcame it. If you're looking for like really specific step-by-step of how to structure a story, there are a lot of different models you can call on. You can look to sort of the old school ones that you may have studied in a literature course, where it talks about the conflict and the resolution and sort of the almost like stage-like elements of a story. And there are folks like David Miller, who wrote Story Brand, who talks about sort of that hero's journey and how you can integrate your customer into that hero's journey. So there's a lot of different ways it can be structured, but I think regardless of the order that you go in or what you name those different parts of the process, we're really just trying to connect on an emotional level and help our audience feel like they're coming along on the journey with us.
So on that note, how can brands really sort of or add that whole element of storytelling in, because usually we'll have to communicate in terms of this is what the product does, this is what the company does for you, here are the benefits and features like that. But how do you bring in that element of storytelling in communication in general?
Sure. So the first part that I mentioned is that it's often a people story, that those are stories to us are most easily understood in the context of individuals, because that's the stories that we're used to hearing in life, right? The books that you read, the movies that you watch, the interacting with your neighbor or a family member, it's always telling a story. So it's very natural. So one of the easiest things you can do is anytime you are trying to tell a particular story, even if that story is about a product or an event or a sale, right? Ask if there's a person involved that you could tell their story. So that might mean telling the story, if you're a hotel, telling the story of the concierge who's worked there for 25 years, who knows the town better than anyone, right? Or we're launching a new model of shoe. Okay, well, what about the designer? What's their story? How did they get into designing the shoe, and why are these specific elements important to them as a designer? There's always going to be someone whose story hasn't been told somewhere along that product journey or that service journey, and I think that is probably, if I had to give one quick tip that would allow you to bring those stories into most circumstances, it's going to be looking for those people. Who are the people whose story is included in this story we're trying to tell, and how could we use them and their story to kind of look at the bigger picture?
I love that. So it's kind of looking into the whole human aspect of things and then build it up from there. Out of the experiences that you've had, Melanie, and I'm sure with like your background, like as a journalist and stuff, I'm pretty sure like, you know, those kind of like skills get kind of, you know, innate to you as well. What are like the great examples that you've seen there in terms of like companies or even products that you've seen that have used storytelling effectively?
Oh my goodness, it's really difficult for me to choose because I spend all day looking at content from brands. And the other thing I want to be careful about is, I think for a lot of folks who may be listening, if you're working with a smaller budget or a smaller team where you don't have as many resources, sometimes you look at a great example of a big brand like a Coca-Cola, IBM, Netflix or something, and it can be really disheartening because you're like, well, I don't have $500,000 to make a video, you know, or I can't hire Oprah to be my spokesperson, you know, and so it can get a little frustrating. But I do think that there are some brands that just have found a really excellent way to integrate this. So one that is like a brand that I know and love is there's a car dealership back in my hometown that works really hard on creating educational content for their consumers. So I think we've all had that experience, especially women, I think, when we go to like the mechanic or the car dealership and you feel like they're kind of just throwing buzzwords at you and like using technical language. Like they're going to confuse you into an upsell, right?
Yeah.
So they have this whole process where before they ever make a repair on your car, the mechanics will actually record a video showing you what's wrong, like pointing it out and saying, see this, it's supposed to be this color, but right now it's white and that means it's run out. So we need to do this. Here's what we recommend. They talk through all the options in really plain language. And then they explain like, this is what this option would cost, and this is what this option would cost, and we'd like to know which you prefer. So they're really focused on, rather than just, I'm the mechanic, I made a fix, really trying to educate the consumers to feel confident and feel like I understand, you know, I understand what they're doing. I understand, you know, why they're doing it. And I also feel like I can trust them because they're being transparent with me. And so, you know, you might not think of that type of interaction, like, you know, like a boring brand, or we're a service company, or people don't care about what we do. But, you know, you can find ways to integrate that content that really connects with people and helps them at every step of the customer journey.
I love the fact that, you know, what stood out to me, it was that whole educational aspect. You know, they like, you know, someone who tells me, here's how you solve your problem, not necessarily what my product can do for you, but here's like, you know, how can be solved for you. I really like that, Melanie. You know, you did mention like boring brands, and that's one of the questions I did want to ask. When you do have a product that, well, it's not necessarily sexy or it's sort of like boring, how do you tell exciting stories about one like that? Because I know you can if you look deep down, but where does one get started?
So I think one thing that is really helpful is to kind of almost get rid of this idea of boring brands, because I think any brand that you sit with long enough might start to feel boring to you, right? Because you see that stuff every day, you know the ins and outs of it, but your customer doesn't, and they're curious and they don't understand how it works. And even if they don't know that they want to know more, knowing more allows them to be more curious, allows them to feel more confident in a sales discussion. So I think education in particular is a really good route to go when you think that you maybe have a brand that's not as exciting or flashy as some of your marketing colleagues. I think oftentimes the reason a brand can feel boring from the inside is because it's very technical. And we feel like, well, people, they're just going to get lost in the jargon. They don't understand, you know, all the fine details. So to me, that's the perfect excuse to teach them about it. You know, you think of a brand like even GE or IBM, they create tons of content. They're familiar brands to us, even though most of us probably have no clue the technical side of what they build, right? Because they're creating content that connects with us anyway. And so I think instead of seeing that complexity of your brand or of your offering as something that is pushing customers away, you could use that complexity to draw customers in by explaining, by teaching, by giving them examples and tutorials. I think there's the educational content to me is almost like a secret weapon, because you can use it for anything. And there are ways to make it really exciting and really utilitarian. I love, if you look at like Home Depot or Lowe's, or, any sort of similar brand, Ace Hardware, et cetera, they all have a really rich educational content base. They're showing people how to use the tools. They're showing people how to fix the tools. They're showing people, how to do different renovations in the home, or, how to make different repairs. Now, at no point are they saying, here's this drill and why it's awesome, and you need to come buy this drill and it's $19.95. They're just showing you what you can do with it, and they're helping you understand the role it can play in your life. And so I think that kind of educational content, whether you're either like teaching them the facts or you're kind of coaching them through a process, it's really something you could do with any brand.
Yeah, that's true. So when it comes to, I want to get a little bit granular, and I know sometimes when it comes to B2C, it feels like it might be a little bit of an easier thing to do, but also, again, not to say boring, but when it's like B2B or SaaS or anything, again, that's a little bit challenging as well. So if I was to get a little bit granular, Melanie, and, as a marketer or a product marketer, you want to get started with that whole content strategy, which obviously educational is a part of.
Yeah.
Where does one start?
So I think the easiest place to look, like your customers or prospects are already telling you the things that they don't understand. They just might not be doing it in the most overt way. So a couple places you can look for inspiration would be look on social media, where you have replies or comments or direct messages of people asking questions or having misunderstandings. That's going to be a great source of information for you of like, this is something people want to know more about, and or this is something I have not provided enough information about. So you can offer that educational content, and that educational content often will be very product oriented. You can create educational content that's explaining, here's who this is for and here's who it's not for. Here's how to know if you're ready to sign up for this program. Here's how to know if you're ready for this tier of our SaaS product, right? Yeah. You can create that content even if it is tightly related to your product. It's still helpful to teach the audience. Another place you can look is any sort of customer service or customer interaction. So if you have customer service tickets that are coming in from your existing customers, or service requests, or your sales team gets a bunch of questions from prospects, all of that is going to be a really rich source of inspiration for what you can create more content about. And the other thing I suggest, and I don't know, maybe this is like really old school in an age where we track everything and everything's digital, I always love to just sit down and talk to customers, sit down and talk to prospects, sit down and talk to your own sales team, right? Yeah. It sounds so simple, but they're going to know, like, what is it that made you feel like you were safe to buy with us? Or what were some of the things you were worried about in your buying journey? Talking to sales, what are the common objections that you get? What are the reasons people think that this isn't a fit? And you have to help them understand that it is a fit. That kind of stuff, looking for those questions or those speed bumps, those obstacles throughout the buyer's journey is a really good place to start. I think in terms of like what specifically to create first, I think in trying to be as realistic as possible, in an ideal world, would you have tons and tons of educational content covering every possible topic that's bringing in search traffic and helping your customers? Sure. Yeah. That's probably not realistic for most of us. I will say that there's some debate about whether that kind of introductory educational content is valuable, because you might feel like, well, my competition is doing that too. Like they have a how-to guide. But the thing is, would you rather your prospects find that information from them or from you? Do you want your sales team to have to send your competition's explainer piece to help your prospects understand? Like, no, right? Yeah. So you can create really valuable stuff. I would say if you have the opportunity to focus on maybe some things that are more timely for you, definitely do that and use this kind of educational base level content as something you kind of keep chugging on in the background. Like if we have some time, or we've got someone new joining the team and they're getting up to speed, they can create this stuff. Or we've got an intern, they can help create this stuff. We've got, a quiet week because of a holiday, we can create this stuff. Use it as sort of your go-to when you have a little extra bandwidth. I think that's a smart way for you to create, a solid base of this stuff, in addition to, your more campaign-oriented content.